Welcome to a deep dive into the story of Queen Jezebel. She's often portrayed as this almost mythical villain, but we're going to dig a bit deeper than that today.
Yeah.
The source you provided focuses on her death, which is truly hard to forget.
Oh, right.
But we're also going to look at what led up to it and why her story still fascinates us centuries later.
It's a story packed with power struggles, ancient curses, and religious clashes. There's a lot to unpack.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in ancient Israel, a kingdom divided in two ways. Jezebel is queen of the northern kingdom, married to King Ahab. What can you tell us about her background and how she came to be seen as such a controversial figure?
Well, Jezebel was a Phoenician princess, and she brought with her the worship of Baal, a prominent deity in Phoenician culture. This introduced a whole new religious element into the kingdom of Israel, one that clashed directly with the worship of Yahweh, the God of Israel.
So it wasn't just a queen marrying into a new kingdom, it was a clash of cultures and faiths. Did this clash have immediate repercussions?
Absolutely. Jezebel didn't just bring her personal beliefs. She actively promoted Baal worship, building temples, and encouraging its practice.
Wow.
This created a lot of tension, especially among the prophets and followers of Yahweh, who saw it as a direct threat to their faith.
It's almost as if the stage is being set for some kind of dramatic showdown, wouldn't you say?
Yes. And that showdown really comes into focus with the story of Naboth's vineyard. This incident reveals a lot about Jezebel's character and her willingness to use power to achieve her aims.
That's the story where King Ahab wants this vineyard, but the owner Naboth refuses to sell because of inheritance laws, right?
Exactly. Ahab throws a tantrum, but Jezebel steps in and takes matters into her own hands. What's fascinating is how she uses the legal and religious systems to orchestrate Naboth's downfall. She forges letters, arranges false witnesses, and even uses a religious fast, a sacred practice, as a cover for her plot.
I find that detail about the religious fast particularly chilling. It's like she's twisting something meant for spiritual purification into a tool for deception and murder. What does that tell us about how power worked in that era?
It's a stark reminder that power, even when intertwined with religion, can be incredibly manipulative. Jezebel understood the levers of power and wasn't afraid to use them, even if it meant bending the rules or exploiting religious practices.
So Naboth is falsely accused, executed, and Ahab gets his vineyard. But this act has some pretty serious repercussions, right?
Yes, this is where the prophet Elijah enters the story. He's a powerful figure known for his direct confrontations with those in power. And he pronounces a devastating curse on Ahab and Jezebel for their actions.
The curse that includes the gruesome detail about Jezebel being devoured by dogs, right? I remember that from Sunday school. It definitely made an impression.
It's a powerful image, and it sets in motion a chain of events that will ultimately lead to Jezebel's downfall. The prophecy isn't just words, it starts to play out almost immediately.
How so? What happens after the curse is pronounced?
Well, first, Ahab is killed in battle. Then his son Joram, who succeeds him as king, is also killed by a military commander named Jehu, who is carrying out the word of the prophet. It's like each step brings Jezebel closer to her own fated encounter with Jehu.
And this Jehu guy, what was his deal? Was he simply a religious fanatic carrying out God's will, or were there other motivations at play?
It's likely a mix of both. Remember, the kingdom was politically divided, and Jehu's actions could also be seen as a power grab consolidating his own authority. He uses the prophecy as justification, but it's always tricky to disentangle religious zeal from political ambition.
That's a great point. It reminds me of how history is rarely a simple good versus evil narrative. So with the prophecy hanging over her, Jezebel is now facing her ultimate challenge, the arrival of Jehu.
Yes, and this is where we really see Jezebel's defiance. Most people would cower in fear, but not Jezebel. Instead, she adorns herself with makeup dresses in her finest robes and positions herself in a window overlooking the street, a very public display of power.
Her actions are so striking. What do you think motivated her to make such a public display? Was it a desperate attempt to intimidate Jehu, or a final act of defiance, a way of going out on her own terms?
It's a complex question, and there are different interpretations. Some see it as a last grasp at power, an attempt to assert her authority even as everything crumbles around her. Others see it as a kind of tragic acceptance, a recognition of her fate, and a decision to meet it head on.
I hadn't thought of it that way. It adds a layer of complexity to her character, doesn't it? But as we know, her defiance doesn't ultimately change the course of events.
No, it doesn't. And this is where the story takes a particularly dark turn, leading to Jezebel's infamous demise. Are you ready to dive into the graphic details of her final moments?
Let's do it. The source you provided really zooms in on this part, and I'm curious to hear your analysis of how her death is described and what it reveals about the power dynamics at play.
It's certainly not a scene for the faint of heart, but it's crucial for understanding how Jezebel's story has been interpreted and why it continues to resonate with us today. Jezebel's death is described in very stark, almost cinematic terms. Her own attendants, perhaps sensing the shift in power or simply fearing for their own lives, throw her out of the window at Jehu's command.
It's a brutal betrayal, isn't it? The people who were supposed to serve and protect her ultimately become the instruments of her downfall. What do you think that says about the nature of power and loyalty in this kind of environment?
It highlights how quickly alliances can shift when power is at stake. Jezebel, for all her strength and defiance, was ultimately reliant on the support of others. And when that support crumbled, she was left incredibly vulnerable.
So she's thrown from the window. What happens next? The source you provided didn't shy away from the details.
No, it doesn't. She falls to the street below, and the description is quite graphic. Horses trample her body, and dogs begin to devour her flesh. It's a very visceral image, one that's meant to shock and horrify.
It's certainly graphic. But what's interesting is that the text doesn't dwell on it emotionally. It's almost a detached, matter-of-fact recounting of events. Why do you think that is?
I think it speaks to the idea of divine judgment being carried out. The focus isn't on Jezebel's suffering, but on the fulfillment of the prophecy. Her death, in all its brutality, is presented as a consequence of her actions, a demonstration of God's power and justice.
So even in her death, Jezebel serves as a warning, an example of what happens when you defy divine will. But even Jehu, after ordering her death, seems to have some respect for her, at least in terms of her royal lineage.
That's right. He instructs his men to give her a proper burial. He acknowledges that she was a king's daughter, a queen. It's a small gesture of respect amidst the violence, but even that is thwarted.
Because when they go to bury her, all they find are fragments, her skull, some bones, and not much else. Just as Elijah had foretold, the dogs had devoured most of her.
It's a powerful image, isn't it? Even in death, Jezebel is denied a full burial. It reinforces the idea of divine judgment and the complete erasure of her presence.
So we have this brutal, unforgettable death scene. But how has Jezebel's story been interpreted throughout history? Why does it still fascinate us thousands of years later?
That's the really intriguing part, isn't it? Jezebel's story is so much more than just a historical account. It taps into these universal themes that resonate across cultures and time periods.
Give us the big picture. What are some of those themes?
Well, there's the obvious theme of divine judgment. Jezebel's actions, the idolatry, the murder of Naboth, the persecution of the prophets are seen as a direct challenge to the God of Israel. Her fate is portrayed as a consequence of that defiance.
It's a pretty stark warning, especially when viewed through a religious lens.
Absolutely. But it goes beyond just punishment. There's also the theme of the resilience of faith. Remember, even during Jezebel's reign, there were prophets like Elijah and Elisha who stood up to her, who kept the faith alive, even when it was dangerous.
It's a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming power, individuals can make a difference, that faith and belief can endure even in the darkest of times. Is that a message that resonates with you on a personal level?
It certainly does. It speaks to the power of conviction, the idea that even when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles, it's important to stay true to one's beliefs.
And then there's the whole issue of power itself. Jezebel's story is a cautionary tale about how power can corrupt, how it can be used for selfish and destructive purposes. It makes you wonder, was she inherently evil, or was she a product of her time and the circumstances she faced?
That's a fascinating question. She's often portrayed as a villain, but it's important to remember that she was operating within a very different cultural and political context. What we might see as ruthless or immoral today might have been seen as simply pragmatic or even necessary for survival in her time.
It's so easy to judge historical figures by our own modern standards, but we need to try to understand the complexities of their world.
Exactly. It's like trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. We can't fully understand Jezebel without understanding the world she lived in.
And maybe that's part of the reason why her story continues to fascinate us. We're trying to make sense of her actions, her motivations, her ultimate fate.
I think that's a big part of it. We're drawn to stories that challenge us, that force us to confront difficult questions about human nature, about power, and about the choices we make.
Jezebel's story certainly fits that bill. She's not a simple character. She's a mix of strength and ruthlessness, of ambition, and perhaps even desperation.
I agree. And I think that complexity is what makes her so compelling. She defies easy categorization. She makes us question our own assumptions about good and evil, about the motivations of those in power, and about the forces that shape history.
So Jezebel's story is this blend of history, religion, and timeless human drama. It's a story that can be interpreted in so many different ways. But one thing's clear. It's a story that continues to capture our imaginations and make us think. It's not just a dusty tale from the past. It's a story that speaks to something deep within us, something that we still grapple with today.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's about power, ambition, faith, and the clash between different cultures and belief systems. These are themes that are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago.
So as we continue our deep dive, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what Jezebel's story might teach us about ourselves and the world we live in today. Yeah. It's amazing how, even after all this time, the story of Jezebel can still spark such lively discussions. It's not just a historical footnote. It really makes you think about the nature of power, leadership, and the choices we make.
Absolutely. And one of the most striking things about Jezebel's story is how it's been used and interpreted over the centuries. She's become this almost symbolic figure representing different things to different people.
Like what? How have perceptions of Jezebel changed over time?
Well, in some traditions, she's seen as the ultimate villain, a symbol of everything that's wrong with female ambition and power. She's painted as a seductress, a manipulator, someone who leads people astray from the true faith.
That's definitely the image that comes to mind for many people when they hear her name. But you're suggesting there's more to it than that?
Right. There's definitely another side to this story. In some feminist interpretations, Jezebel is seen as a strong, independent woman who refused to bow to patriarchal pressures. She challenged the religious and political establishment of her time, and she paid the price for it.
So it's almost like her story is a Rorschach test, reflecting the biases and perspectives of those who interpret it.
That's a great way to put it. And that's what makes her story so enduring and relevant. It forces us to confront our own assumptions about gender, power, and religion. It asks us a question: who gets to write history, and how stories are used to reinforce or challenge existing power structures.
It's a reminder that history isn't just a set of facts. It's a narrative, a story that we construct and reconstruct based on our own values and perspectives.
Precisely. And those narratives have a powerful influence on how we see the world and our place in it. They can shape our understanding of right and wrong, good and evil, and even the roles that men and women are expected to play in society.
So what does this all mean for us here in the 21st century? Why should we care about this ancient queen and her dramatic demise?
I think Jezebel's story offers us some timeless insights that are still relevant today. For one, it reminds us that actions have consequences. Whether you see her as a villain or a victim, there's no denying that Jezebel's choices had a profound impact on her life and the lives of those around her.
It's like that saying, you reap what you sow. Even if you disagree with how Jezebel is portrayed, there's a lesson there about taking responsibility for our actions.
Exactly. And this applies not just to individuals, but to institutions, to governments, to entire societies. When power is abused, when justice is ignored, there are always consequences.
It's a reminder that we're not just free agents acting in a vacuum. Our choices, our actions, have a ripple effect impacting others and shaping the course of history.
Right. And on a personal level, I think Jezebel's story encourages us to be critical thinkers, to question the narratives we're presented with, and to dig deeper for ourselves. Don't just accept the easy answers or the simplistic labels. Explore different perspectives. Challenge your own assumptions.
It's about recognizing that history is complex and multifaceted, and that even figures like Jezebel, who've been demonized for centuries, might have more to their story than we initially realize.
Exactly. And by engaging with these stories thoughtfully, by wrestling with their ambiguities and contradictions, we can learn a lot about ourselves and the world around us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Queen Jezebel, I'm left with a question for you and for all our listeners. Does Jezebel deserve her infamy? Was she truly evil, or was she a product of her time and circumstances?
That's a great question to ponder. And I honestly don't think there's a simple answer. Maybe it's not about finding a definitive answer, but about engaging in the process of questioning, exploring, and challenging our own preconceived notions.
Maybe the real value lies in the journey, in the process of discovering and uncovering different perspectives, rather than arriving at a neat and tidy conclusion.
Well said. And that's what makes a deep dive so rewarding. It's not about memorizing facts or accepting what we're told. It's about embracing the messiness of history, the complexities of human nature, and the enduring power of stories to shape our understanding of the world.
So to everyone listening, I encourage you to continue exploring Jezebel's story. Read different interpretations, consider various viewpoints, and form your own conclusions. And remember, the most intriguing stories, the most valuable lessons often lie in those gray areas, in the spaces between good and evil, between hero and villain.
Keep questioning, keep exploring. That's the essence of a true deep dive.